Welcome to Reclaiming Agency, where we explore what happens when people and communities take ownership of their own futures. This podcast is produced by Recover Appalachia, a social enterprise working at the intersection of entrepreneurial mindset education, recovery and reentry, and inclusive economic development. In each episode, we sit down with people who are challenging traditional top-down models and asking what it really takes to build economic futures from the ground up. Welcome to the podcast, Kristen, Livingston.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Mm-hmm.
So you are a therapist. This is going to be
Yes.
such a fun conversation.
That's normally what people think when they come to when they come to talk to a therapist, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've only recently gotten to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to. I'd love to get acquainted with you, but I'm interested in how you got into the field. Let's start there.
Yeah. Well, it's somewhat interesting. So, I don't know if you've ever thought about like how you make a lot of decisions before your brain's fully developed, like before the age of 20 or 30.
Mm-hmm.
So my friend and I were taking some college classes down here at Shawnee, and that was a new thing at that time. And actually, the leaders of our school did not want us to do that. They discouraged us.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, we needed like another credit during one of our semesters. And my friend's father had recommended that we take a social work introductory class because it was a growing field.
Mm-hmm.
The friend of mine that took it with me, she went a different direction. She is now an art therapist, so she thought it was a little bit too clinical for her.
Mm-hmm.
However, like when I was there, I was like, oh, like it just felt like normal to me, like something that was just like tying your shoes. And I never really thought about social work prior to that. Like I had been a volunteer at the local hospital, and I always thought that I wanted to work like in the medical field, like maybe be a PA or something like that. But once I took that class, I was certain, and I never really changed my mind.
What was it that made you certain? Was there a moment? Was there an insight?
It was just the feeling that I had, like that this is just what I know, like inside, like this is just what I know, like my values fit with what the values of this profession are. Like I felt like it was natural. I didn't have to try very hard. And I had a professor who was like, whoa, you kind of scored higher than some of the college kids. Like, what's going on here? And I was like, I don't really know, but I think I might want to explore this more.
Mm-hmm. What are a few of those values?
I think humility and compassion, cultural competence, perseverance, being hardworking, being very systems oriented.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few memories of my childhood where like I always rode the school bus, and I remember like I would always try to figure out people's stories, like particularly people who had some mismatches or some incongruencies, right? Like there was a kid I went to school with that had really poor hygiene, and I always try to figure out why. And there was a murder on my street when I was growing up, and I always really thought about that and why and how that happened, how it affected the community and the families that were involved. And now that I look back, that's kind of like a social work paradigm, the way that I was trying to think, as a young child. So it just felt natural. I like to make meaning, and I like to link things together, and I like to find a path through things that are difficult. And I feel like, even looking back the way I saw my friends and their family life, I was always assessing it. And it wasn't because like I was vigilant or scared or anything. I was just like, it's like a puzzle, it's like a puzzle. And it's like, I want to know about before we started, I was like, man, I want to meet Josh's wife, because like it just gives context to your story.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just been like a natural way of thinking throughout my life.
Yeah. So what professional paths, work-wise, have you gone down since getting your degree and getting into the field?
I finished my bachelor's degree at Shawnee State, and I was 20. Mm-hmm. And this was a very like important time in my life. So I had struggled with anxiety, and I had never really had that named before. for me. But you know, I would have stomach aches and things when I was a kid. Like I definitely showed a lot of like childhood signs of anxiety that you would see in girls. And I remember just feeling this like impending doom, like everything I know is coming to an end.
Wow.
You know, I've got a lot of credits out of the way before I even graduated high school. There was a lot of pressure from my father to be a high performing student, right?
Okay.
So, and I did so throughout 2 more years of college. And then, as graduation got closer, my anxiety got worse, right? Like I just kept feeling like everything I know that makes me feel secure, for a lot of different reasons, is coming to a halt. And I was walking through the university center as it is today, which was new at that time, and they were doing depression and anxiety screenings. And that's where I met my first therapist.
Okay.
And so I had done the screening, and they needed to get so many done, so I just kind of volunteered to do one because I wanted them to do well. I wanted them to get their numbers. And then like a few weeks later, I was like, maybe I should email him. Because maybe there's something to this, right? Mm-hmm. And so then at that time, I was really struggling with like the future because of some family situations and the dynamics of my family of origin. I felt like, leaving my mother to go to graduate school was a very hard thing for me.
Okay.
And at that point, I started to look into self-help. And spirituality became a part of my life, and it hadn't been for probably, at that point, about 8 years. I had gone away from church and any kind of environment like that. And I also started to accept mentorship from different people in my life, friends, parents, a professor specifically, some fellow students, and so then I decided to go to graduate school, which it was not easy. And once I got there, I did my first internship out of college. And it was really not what I thought it would be. It was extremely disappointing. But because I had got help for the first time from a university counseling center, I was like, this is perfect, right? It was just not the right people in the right time. It was not perfect. So then I went to someone I trusted who was an adjunct professor, and I was like, hey, I don't really care where I go. I just want to go with someone that can mentor me and help guide me, because I'm I was really disappointed. I felt like this is not what I thought it would be like. So that's when she recommended that I work with a therapist who was actually an attachment and adoption specialist.
Interesting.
Which was interesting because I had no desire to work with children, really no desire to even talk to a child at that time in my life or even be around one, right? So I did that, and everything started to come together in my mind, both about my own life and the lives of other people. And this person became another mentor, a very special mentor in my life. And so at various points in my life where I felt like, I was losing a sense of agency, so to speak, and I didn't really have a path, I feel like there was someone that would come along and kind of show me hey, I believe in you. I feel like there's a path for you. And I would typically take well to that.
Mm-hmm. And that's an important piece, right? The mentorship aspect that you're talking about, having someone who's, to some degree, been where it is that you're trying to go. They have more life experience, whatever, under their belt, and they can affirm you, they can validate you, they can encourage you along the way. That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, and this particular person, she had something I wanted, which actually had nothing to do with her job. Mm-hmm. She had a secure sense of family. She had a very secure relationship with her husband, and she had 2 children. And she just, to me, that's kind of the dream at that point, right? Is
Gotcha.
Not only to help others, but to also achieve something that seemed kind of impossible to me at certain points in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I really started to take advice from her and I would have stayed working under that person up in Athens probably for my whole life if I could have. Yeah. But at that time, I was, engaged to be married. So when I graduated, I came back to Portsmouth, which is, where I was born and raised. Mm-hmm. I had sent a random application to a community mental health center that they didn't respond to. But around the time that my fiance, now husband, had got a job, I got a call from them. So I was thrown into the community mental health field. And I remember thinking, there's no training. There's shadowing, right? But that's not training.
Right.
And what you learn in class is nothing, to do with what you experience in the field.
Field work, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, here I am, I'm 22, and this is a lot, but immediately I just took to the clients. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a best friend or anything, I'd had at other points in my life, but I just took to the clients. I felt really a relational pull toward them. And that's what's guided my work. This is my home. My degree is actually in rural clinical social work.
Okay.
I'd always intended to work in rural Ohio, and did that for a while. Worked with young kids for a while, early childhood mental health, because I went back to work for my mentor. And then in that time, the Community Mental Health Center called me back to work at a more rural, actually in Adams County, at a center there as a supervisor, which was a unique job for me at that time because I was really into this people pleasing thing.
Sure. Right?
So when you're in middle management, your boss is not your friend and your employees are not your friends. Right?
It's a barren wasteland.
Exactly. So I was like, wow, this is pretty lonely. And there's a lot of things that happened in between there and now, but you asked me about my work trajectory, so I'm talking about that. So, but I got a lot of skills during that time, and I felt pretty content. I felt like I was doing good work. And that's kind of my thing. I just want to do good works. The money was not that important to me. As long as I can live, I felt like, hey, I could do this forever. Mm-hmm. But then I decided, that I wanted to be a mother, and that led me to more security and stability. So I got a government job, right? Yes. Because that's what I think a lot of people aspire to do.
Sure.
And I did that for 6 years, and it was really rewarding. And again, learned a lot about myself independently of others. It was kind of a isolated office setting. Mm-hmm. And then I got to the point that I decided, how can I keep loving the work while also not causing damage to my body, myself, and my family?
Okay. And
at that point, I just shot a text message to a friend and said, do you think I could start my own business? But I was already filing for the LLC and everything. It was already happening. Yeah. And I just put one foot in front of the other. And that's what I've been doing every day since that was last March.
Last March.
Yeah. Yes. And so I left my government job on September 11th of 2025, and since then I've been self-employed.
It's exciting.
And scary.
And scary. So you were already filing, you were already taking the steps out of one thing and into something new, mm-hmm. but you're texting your friend, do you think I can do this? What are you feeling during that transition period? The fear, it's exciting, it's scary.
Kind of do I really have the resources or the knowledge? I know I have, I'm good with people, right? Yeah. But it takes a lot more than that. Okay. So I was like, I feel like I need to be more connected. Mm-hmm. That's what I was feeling. And I know that this person is very connected. Mm-hmm. And in truth, she did connect me to a lot of resources. But I was feeling kind of I mean, there was no one at that time. There was no mentor. There was no one saying, "Hey, come over here. You know, the grass is greener." I was kind of backed into a corner.
Yeah.
You know, personally, to where it was like, no, you are going to have to step out of the corner. There's no one that's going to come and lead you. You've been alone in these roles to learn how to be alone in these roles and use your skills and not question yourself. And that was something, like, I always felt like I needed someone to tell me that it was going to be okay and to encourage me.
Sure, yeah.
And I didn't have that.
What has the identity shift been like for you? Compared to a year and a half ago when you stepped out of your government job to sitting here with me today, like, what's the ratio, the proportion of how much do you feel like you are an entrepreneur, whereas maybe before you didn't see yourself so much on a path like this? What's that been like?
I mean, 100% I see myself as an entrepreneur and see myself as, like, having a sense of control over my life.
What was the percentage to begin with as you began to take those steps or think about taking them? Like, what's the progress been like? What has helped facilitate that identity shift in your own mind?
So I believe what helps that is the story that we tell ourselves.
Okay.
And that is something that there's a thread of throughout my clinical work and throughout my own story. And so the moment I began to tell myself a different story, I had to step into that story and, you know, be a player in this new story. Because the story that I told myself a year ago, you know, prior to doing this, like, let's say the prior September, was, you know, I'm stuck. I can't help myself. I can't help others as much as I want to. I'm not working to my potential. And that was really not a good story to tell yourself.
Were you always aware? At what point did you become aware that that's the story you were telling yourself?
How
did that happen?
I think that I've been aware, but I was reading a Mel Robbins book, and there was this passage about, you know, like, the next time you see someone doing the thing that you want to do, right? And I got, like, this sick feeling in my stomach, almost like you're being laughed at as a child, like, and you're, you know, doing the wrong thing in gym class. Like, I'm like, I cannot have this feeling ever again.
Yeah.
Like, I could have pictured someone opening a small private therapy practice, and I wouldn't have been jealous, but I would have been envious.
Okay.
Right? Because, like, the turning point for me was really, like, and I say this all the time to people, even to my clients, I tell this story. I used to think that, like, entrepreneurs or people that did well in life were more resourced. Like, they had, like, inherited money, or they had a higher degree, or they had a better skill set, or perhaps they were more creative, whatever they had. And then I started to really look at the people, and this shift happened once I started talking to people that were having more of the lifestyle that I'm working toward. And I wouldn't say I'm 100% there, but I'm working toward that. They only had really one thing I didn't have, and that was courage. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, what is courage? How are we defining this? Like, just the willingness to do?
I think courage is just the willingness to step out and then follow through. Okay. You know, once you take that step, it's, you know, 100%.
So you're saying that the only difference you began to see between you and these other folks were just that they were just doing it, and you just hadn't done it yet.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yep.
And that was motivating for you to say, why not me? Why not take these steps?
Well, not at first. I mean, at first it was like, is that a trait that you get from your mom? Or, like, where do you get that?
It's innate.
You get that in school? Like, I don't know. Is that something innate? Is that something changeable? But then I realized, like, how to be more courageous is experiential. You know, you learn by doing. And so it's exactly what you said. I also had a moment, another critical moment. I was meeting with someone, and I was phasing out of my full-time job, and I was starting my business and figuring out how to market. And like the person looked so comfortable in their own skin, Josh. And I was like, wonder what that feels like. Because they were so like relaxed and comfortable in their own skin, and like I could tell like they're living their path. Their path is right.
Yeah.
I could feel my nervous system like, you know, like I'm wired, you know, and I was like, I wonder how often that's actually happening, you know, but I'm not really noticing it because like I'm just in survival, you know, like I just feel like every day is, you know, something you got to get through. And this person was like, hey, you know, I offer this service. It's this much money. If you don't want it, like, that's cool. You know, like, thanks for the coffee. You know, and then they were going to be fine. Like, they were not going to sweat it. And I kind of realized that, like, courage and, like, just, you know, being more authentic, you know, trying to live more authentically. And, you know, because that's kind of like relates back to the question you asked about, like, what was I feeling in that moment? And, you know, when I decided on my career path, and it just felt natural. And I think, you know, we get away from that in life. Like, we get away from, like, our natural gifts and our intuition and all of that because we try to fit in these boxes, and sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of a line, and I'd butcher it if I tried to quote it, from Julia Cameron. Are you familiar with Julia Cameron?
Yes.
The artist's way? But she said something to the effect of, you know, most of us weren't taught growing up that we could expect to live our dreams, that we could actually have these things, that we were worthy of them, that they were achievable by us, something like that. I'm totally butchering it, but I think you get
I've
the
read
point,
the
right?
book too, so yeah,
Yeah.
but that, yes.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of people who kind of have that moment, or that their version of that moment, where they start to ask themselves, why not me? Why have I for so long told myself a story where I've just immediately cut myself out of opportunities or a kind of life that I see other people having? Why them and not me? You know, and that's I think a moment of awareness, I guess, a first kind of step for a lot of people onto a new path, right? But what is it? Where do the stories come from that we tell ourselves? Or maybe, and keep this as practical, I guess, as possible. So if we're talking about your story, where do you see those stories, the self-limiting ones?
I think they come from our early life.
Okay.
Whether it be something that comes from our family of origin, you know, our family that we grew up in, whether it comes from the church, whether it comes from our teachers, you know, in elementary school. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, our peers, our community. You know, I grew up right here in Portsmouth. So, you know, I've been around to see the different phases of our city and what's happened here. And I think some of it is, you know, kind of a reflection of what you're living in, you know, what your life is like outside of your little home and what you're actually exposed to. You know, I think some people are told from the beginning, at least I imagine, you know, a story that fits for them, and then some of the rest of us have to kind of realign.
Yeah. And I imagine the formation of our stories, it's not always explicit. It's not like mom sets us down and says, here's what you can and cannot expect
It's
in your
never
life.
explicit. It's implicit. You know, it's what's deep in our nervous system. You know, the pain and the suffering of our community or our family or what we, this is something kind of interesting. So I remember being in a hospital when I was like 11 or 12 years old, and there was this like, you know, those timelines in school where it's like Abe Lincoln, all the presidents and what they did and how they helped our country. Except this was all the like presidents with mental illness, right? And so like looking back on this memory, I now know that was a psychiatric hospital. And I was there visiting my grandmother, and I have, now that I'm old enough to understand, I realize I visited her a few times, you know, when she was in an acute psychiatric crisis. And I think that it was interesting that I never had any context for certain things that happened in my life or in my family. And I think what we do as children is we fill in the gaps with like information, and it could be right, it could be wrong, right? Like, if you fall down, and it could be like, man, I'm really not athletic, or you could just say the road was bumpy. But whatever you tell yourself in that moment is going to be reinforced by every other event that you have in life. And I think that is profound, that's, at some point you're going to decide, like, is that my story, or is that coming from the story that was told to me, or like you said, the implicit memories that we have?
And is it possible, if I choose at a certain point, to self-author a new story for myself? That's really exciting to me, right? How that happens in a person's life, or can happen potentially, and for those of us who are doing the type of work that we're trying to do with Recover Appalachia, how do we help facilitate those types of transformations for other individuals who may be open to receiving them? Any thoughts?
Well, I was like, is that a question? I mean, I think first of all, you have to be regulated enough to step out of your story, right? And kind of look at it as a calm and regulated observer.
Okay.
So you can actually see, what is my story that I'm, participating in right now? And is that in alignment with who I am, my sense of self, or is that, a child version of me, or is that my father's voice, my mother's voice, my grandmother's voice? Now, of course, there's subconscious things that happen, but I think, we're gifted with self-awareness and mindfulness, but that's something we cultivate. When you live in a state of survival, like many people do, and I think most of us have at some point, and especially folks who are first, trying to clean up their life, find a new path, often, that shift is significant, because even though you're safe and, you're not in the same race anymore, your body has to catch up to that, and then when that happens, I think that's when you can get more distance, and you can say, okay, is this something that I want to keep going with, or, can I start a new chapter here?
So it's safety first, is what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely.
Essentially, right?
Yes.
Safety first, which provides you the space to be able to, for the first time maybe, detach yourself from that story or that, whatever it is, and look at it objectively as a third-party observer. Am I hearing you right?
I mean, that's been my experience, and I've seen that with a lot of clients I've worked with.
Okay.
And I'm certain that's not the only way, but...
Yeah, well, what about when we're talking about individuals who maybe have struggled with an addiction of some sort, substance use disorder or other form of addiction, under which there may be traumas and adverse childhood experiences? Is it doubly important for those individuals as opposed to us normies to have that safety first before we talk about, or they're able to approach that type of self-awareness and transformation?
I mean, the way I work, Josh, is that everyone has trauma. I work in a way that is trauma-informed. So I consider anyone who walks in my door to be a trauma survivor.
Okay.
Because whether they are or not, the principles that are important, they're not going to harm someone. They don't have trauma, right?
Yeah.
But the vast majority of people that walk through my door have an ACE score of at least 6 or more.
Okay.
So, those adverse childhood experiences.
And for people who may be listening to this talk, a scale of, what is the scale, the ACE scale?
It's,
Can you put that in context?
0 to 10.
0 to 10.
And it's, 10 experiences that we have before the age of 18 that are shown to have really negative outcomes on our physical health, and also mental health, addiction, things like that. And so, I also am of the opinion that, we can't just keep kind of taking, shaving the tip of the iceberg away, right? Which is behaviors, addiction, self-limiting beliefs, things like that. Like, we need to really start to hold each other in a way that's safe enough to see what created that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's, the ACEs, it's everything underneath.
Yeah. So what does that look like in practice to hold each other in that way that you're describing?
Well, you mentioned safety,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so for people to really tell their story, they have to feel safe. And they have to feel valid. They have to feel that whatever their pain is, that it's valid to you.
That can be tough for certain people, right?
I don't really have
Not me. I'm not thinking of myself.
Yeah, I don't really have that problem
Yeah.
because I try to keep myself out of it,
Okay.
and see it from their point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if I'm navigating addiction and trying to think about, how am I going to make a living, after coming out of transitional housing,
Mm-hmm.
I try to look at it as though I'm in that moment.
Okay. And that helps you when you're working with clients. How does that help you be present for them in ways that are helpful to them?
Well, I think the number one thing is collaboration.
Okay.
I think that when you approach people that are in pain, so I mentioned, I have mentors myself, right? And I've also been to therapy. And I believe that when you approach someone from a place of power, which of course we have the natural power dynamics in life, and that's okay. But I believe that in order to empower someone, you cannot stand over them and say, well, this is what I think you should do.
Mm-hmm.
This is obvious, right? This is going to work out.
Yep.
I know more than you about your life.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that's a real tricky thing to navigate, especially when we're talking about some of the systems that people, encounter and go through. Justice impacted folks, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, and this is me from a non-clinical perspective, so, take it for what it's worth, but even in the field of healthcare as it relates to people with a substance use disorder, the treatment industry, there can be elements that seem sometimes only maybe a step down from full-on incarceration, which has, very elements of, again, power over,
Mm-hmm.
where individuals can feel very infantilized. Is that the correct word? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying, getting at, I guess, is there can be a subtle, even unconscious conditioning within these systems that keeps people from ever approaching a place of safety and then empowerment beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
where they can reauthor their stories and create a new life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
Have you seen that with people you work with?
Yeah, and I try to do it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I can't answer for the greater good of society, but all I know is that, the 60 people that have came through my door,
Mm-hmm.
it's like welcome home.
Okay.
Hey, we're going to sit and we're going to have a conversation, and I'm going to be honored to even hear your story and to
Mm-hmm.
be a participant in, selling your ship
Mm-hmm.
toward, the light that you're going toward, right? I'm thrilled, to meet every person I meet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a therapist for the rich and famous, because I'm not rich and famous. So
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't relate to them very well, right? I'm a therapist for regular people. And, someone asked me, what is your, target population, right? Because I was trying to learn about marketing.
Sure.
Because, by the way, I've had no business education. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not really sure, but I like this population, I like this population. And she's like, none of that goes together. And so I've been, working hard lately to find the thread. And so the thread is I tend to attract people that don't feel comfortable other places.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that any one of us can solve the problem. I think that each of us, lays a stone on the path, and the next person is going to come and they're going to lay a stone that looks completely different, and is completely a gift of their own kind. And so I think that, I understand that the macro work is important, but also in order for any plan to work, because sometimes what plans look like on paper or at the state level, or at the insurance company, they don't get executed like that.
No.
Right? And so I think that if we're all really clear about what our mission is and our vision, we can also help the people on the micro level to develop that, our clients. Is what is your mission? What's your mission, man? Like, what's your vision for your life?
Right.
Because I'm seeing life from my perspective. And I want to understand, like, what is someone else's mission and vision.
Yeah. So that makes me think of, like, the subject of outcomes. In your work, what does healing or a successful outcome look like? It sounds like you're starting to say that, that even deciding that is a kind of a co-creative process that you have with your clients. And it's not all just you saying, well, here's what we need to work towards. It's kind of a process of exploration, and it's self-directed very much on their part. Where are you moving towards? Where can I help you towards? Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, self-determination is huge for my clients. I'm not the court system. I'm not your parents. Like, if you're coming here, like, you need to have goals, and maybe your goal is to develop goals or stick to your goals, right? And that's enough to get started, right? But, like, there's no prescription. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to healing, because healing is relational, and people heal through relationships.
I like that.
And so hearing their story, being with them in the mud, if you have to, right? Like, because sometimes that's what people need. Like, can you weather this part of my story with me, until there's a lotus? Because we just can't do that alone.
Yeah. Do you think that's one of the unique values of therapy, is being able to have somebody who has not been with you through a lot of the real destructive, maybe, seasons of life? Because that can be hard, can't it? For, like, close loved ones, maybe, who have been burned, or you have burned, or been burned, by vice versa. A lot of complexity, right? So to have that kind of relationship where it's very safe and very whatever this person needs, isn't that easier in a lot of cases with someone who is a little bit further removed from some of the history?
I would think so.
Am I right to say that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes getting the history is important, but yeah, I mean, you're not in their story, right? And so you're helping with the reauthoring and things like that, but you're not in it. And that, I think, is important for a lot of people, because, they're trying to get distance from it. And so it's very important that as, clinicians, we kind of hold ourselves to the standard of, we may self-disclose at times, which actually I have a question about that. But I feel like getting some distance, being some distance away is important. But I do want to say something culturally. I think it's very important that your therapist understands your culture. And whether you have a different culture than them or not, that really is not what I'm saying, that you have to be culturally similar, but you have to be willing to understand their culture. But there's something special about us in rural Ohio. Like, we are a little different, Josh.
Sure.
Yeah. And, I think and I think that, like, having people like you and me that, like, we're from here, right? Like, this is not we're not studying these foreign subjects. Like, we grew up with these people. And so I think that's really important sometimes, that you do have someone who's kind of understands your culture in a personal way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to know where you're coming from.
Yeah, or at least pieces of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have someone who's willing to try to learn that and understand that, and it's also nice to have somebody who just gets it.
Exactly.
Because they share that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, what's your question?
Well, so when I was thinking about preparing for the podcast, I had asked someone a question. They're like, you should ask him. And, the question is, like, I feel like in the addictions field, there's a lot of self-disclosure, and there's a lot of, like, parallel process. Like, you might be at a meeting, and also one of your clients could be at the meeting, perhaps, right? Or someone that you've worked with in a vocational role or something. But in the field of mental health, which really I've centered my work mostly around trauma and mental health conditions, like, I am wondering, is there still this perceived stigma that I sometimes see about like sharing your story in that realm? Or have you had any experience with how people's trauma recovery is shared in a productive way to help others?
Maybe I'm going to ask you to rephrase it a bit, because I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me. You're saying, is the self-disclosure in spaces
Is the self-disclosure in some spaces more normalized? And is it okay to be among your peers in certain settings more so than it is in others, right? So like, lots of people know each other's story related to recovering from substances.
Right.
But when we talk about trauma and mental health issues, I don't see the same kind of like shared experience, lived experience. I don't really see people sharing that as much.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe is it a cultural thing, because there's a long tradition within like AA and NA traditions of the mutual peer support and hitting rock bottom, and then just becoming rigorously honest, with yourself and with your peers and with your sponsor and with whoever you're needing to make amends to, and that means a lot of disclosure, right? As long as it doesn't harm somebody else, I believe is the language of the 12 steps. So I think there's a long maybe culture that's been built and established there.
What do you think about the culture surrounding seeking help for mental health?
Yeah.
Particularly in this area, or trauma. Like, let's say someone, they get sober, but then they're like, okay, now, can everyone tell me about their trauma healing? Can we sit around and talk about that? I feel like we're not there yet.
Oh, I can see what you're saying, for sure. And why? That's a really good question.
Well, and the reason why I bring this up is because people come in and they have a lot of shame.
Yeah.
They feel broken, defective, they have a lot of shame. And I know that they do that at the beginning of their journey, but sometimes when you open up the story of your trauma to heal it, people really are still feeling like, man, I'm the only one.
Sure.
That feels like this.
Yeah.
Defective, broken, just, unforgivable.
Yeah.
In a way.
Well, I think probably a lot of it comes back to your first point about safety, of feeling safe enough to disclose parts of yourself and parts of your story, because especially in those parts there's so much shame attached to it. Brene Brown's work on shame, there was a season I went through where I was really taking a lot from her work on that. And
I have a picture of her face in my office.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shame being this kind of like this corrosive element, right? And the differentiation between shame and guilt. And shame is identity focused and guilt is behavior, right? And
yeah, guilt's there to show us that we've went against our values, right? And shame is an inherent brokenness. And a lot of times I think that comes from or lack of worth. I'm unworthy of healing, or my story's not worthy of your time, or and that is something I see a lot of in the people that I attract to my practice.
Okay. I think this is a really important question, and I like that you bring it up, and I'm making connections in my mind between my first interview with Zach and now coming to talk with you, because he really emphasized a lot, that sobriety is just a starting point for a person's journey of healing. And what follows that
and there were some
maybe
definite
a lot of this work
points
here, right?
in his story where I feel like shame was a guiding mover toward like maybe suicidal ideation and things like that.
Sure.
And we see that a lot in our work. And so I think that, this is also where community comes in. And this, feeling of agency comes from seeing other people who have also suffered and who are also suffering in their humanness, but they're also doing the thing, right? And so if you're in community with people like that, then your sense of agency is definitely going to be stronger, because you're going to be like, okay, maybe it's a negative experience that actually helped them grow and start thinking outside of the box. I mean, that's definitely a big part of my story for starting a business. And I think that people need to see that, and not so much see I have this like saying I've adopted lately, like, quit trying to bring it to me in a perfect package, right? Like,
Sure.
just bring me the stuff, it's like craft day, right? And I'll put it together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't need to worry about getting it neat
Mm-hmm.
and getting it perfect.
Yeah.
We'll do that together. Just bring me what you have.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
if there's pieces missing, we'll figure it out together.
Yeah, yeah. I can see how that would be very helpful for some people, for sure. I'm the kind of person, for instance, that I would probably be more prone to want to bring it,
Mm-hmm.
prepackaged, because I guess I'm like you in the sense, I'm always searching for meaning and trying to create meaning personally in my own life, and then, in everything I see around me in the world.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want it. Like, I want you to bring the stuff you haven't figured out yet.
Yeah.
Like, when you're like, okay, I came to this conclusion. Well, that's great, and that's a strength, but, like, bring me the other stuff.
What is still unresolved?
What's messy,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
and people understanding that, their messy humanness is not a fatal flaw.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that's the hurdle. Well, I'm sure it is for a lot of people. I know it has been for me, for sure, too. That hurdle of thinking that, maybe I should have been past this already. Maybe I should have already outgrown this or figured this out.
Hear that a lot.
And if I let too many people know about this or see this, then people won't trust me anymore. They won't see me as whatever they might see me as, right? I think that's a hurdle for a lot of people, too.
And, parts of our story they don't just go away.
Right.
They culminate, they change, but, like, those pieces are still there.
Yep.
And I think that sometimes if we present as, a leader or a therapist or someone, in a position like yours, nonprofits, sometimes they're seeing this perfect package.
Mm-hmm.
And they're thinking, I'm not like that. I can't be that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I at times have felt, like a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. Right? And it's like, well, that's my perception at that time. And but I will say, I've now realized that, you can create your own hole that's a better fit for you, and you can shape yourself. But I moved away from shaping myself into what, like, I thought would get me, like, to be more perfect and more liked, to, like, just, like, what I am, like, what's already here.
Yeah.
And then if it fits some places, that's great, and other places it won't.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important part of agency is, like, you don't have to do this thing, this one thing or these two things, right? Like, it may take a while for you to find the things that empower you. But they have to be the right things. You have to cultivate the right, like, environment and structure for your life.
Yeah.
And everyone's is a little different. And that's where I think really getting to know people and their strengths, and, like, we know that you make meaning out of stuff, and, you're philosophical, right? So, like, that's part of the environment that you need.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be a 9-to-5 factory worker, like, and feel fulfilled and go home after 40 years and just hang up your hat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for some people, that's really important, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
I just think that trying to fit where we don't belong is what creates a lot of pain. Like,
Yeah.
why don't we just try to figure out where we actually belong instead of trying to fit over and over into a place that just really isn't a good fit.
Yeah. So healing and growth and agency and what it creates in a person's life is a lot about, it's a lot about knowing yourself. It's about self-exploration. It's about finding out who you are. As you're talking there, I'm thinking of an old Carl Jung quote that I loved, which was, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you are. That was, Jung's individuation theory, right?
Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of that.
Oh, my goodness, right?
I've done a lot of searching.
Yeah.
When I mentioned spirituality, at the age of 19, I kind of started that.
Mm-hmm.
I read Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth and A
Okay.
Power of Now, and it kind of took me on a path that has been so much self-exploration.
Sure.
And, I think it's so exciting because there's parts of yourself that you haven't even seen yet. There's parts of your journey that illuminate parts of yourself or strengths that you have or limitations or growth points that you have. And like, so you never get bored because the path keeps going.
Yeah.
If you stay on it, right? And I certainly get off of it, but you know, it's like, there's not an end.
Right. And that can be, or I've found, for me, that can be both, I don't know what the words are. I guess you can get lost, you know, going too deep into like the introspective, you know, kind of rabbit hole. But if you can approach, you know, self-awareness and self-knowledge and self-exploration and finding out who you are and exploring all of that, and you can pair it in some way with like your work in the world and your service to the world, and your interactions with
like
other
the
people.
practicalities that like I think your program is going to bring to people's lives and things of that nature. I think people need help sometimes bridging what they know and how to see the results of that in their day-to-day life, right? Like, I mean, I myself have had aha moments that didn't translate immediately to, you know, living better day to day, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's also where mentorship and working with folks who, you know, have that similar interest of applying strengths to practical day-to-day life, like I think that is an essential part of the journey.
Yes, and to love the questions themselves, as Roki said. Perhaps if we live into the unanswered questions of our life, he said, you know, they often trouble us, but if we live into them, perhaps we'll live along someday into an answer. And I think Jung referred to that too. He said a lot of problems we don't actually solve, we just kind of outgrow them eventually, if we kind of stay on this path of individuation, right? So that's good. Man, I could just sit here and talk about this stuff all day long.
I mean, it's endless, right? You just said it yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
so the work we're doing here, Kristen, we, you know, with this podcast and Recover Appalachia, I see it kind of at the intersection of recovery and reentry, right? We're trying to serve returning citizens in a way that, you know, maybe they're not getting a lot in our communities and our societies. Inclusive economic development, right? And there's a lot of voices out there in that space right now emerging, becoming stronger, with evidence to show that communities, especially distressed, rural, socioeconomically challenged communities like ours, need to take more of a bottom-up approach to economic development rather than a top-down approach. And that, in many cases, means we need to empower our people to see themselves and then live into this identity as value creators and problem solvers. And if that means starting a business or a micro-enterprise, great. But if it doesn't, that can mean a whole lot of other things in a person's life.
People need to have meaning.
Right.
Whether that's being a deacon at the church or refereeing a ball game or starting their own business, people need to have meaning in their life.
Yes.
And to be meaningful, perceived as meaningful by their community and those that matter to them.
Yes, that's the self-determination theory that I think you referenced. What were the three things that they said all humans need for like optimal flourishing? Autonomy, a sense that I'm in control of my life. You know, and that's agency, a lot of that right there. Belonging, I think, was the second one. Correct me if I'm wrong here. And what? Connectedness? I think so. I think those are the three.
And I think that
that's the relational element you're talking about. Yeah.
So I think that all of those are true. I mean, in practical therapy and meeting, you know, thousands of people over my year, you know, 12 years in the field, like I definitely think that those are all practical.
Yeah. And I want to say that maybe I'm conflating those last two, connectedness and belonging. Maybe mastery was the second one, but this feeling of being good at something, that I'm competent in my work.
Exactly.
That my work brings value to other people in the world.
Because that's a mood booster. Like you have to have things, you can't constantly fail and continue to move forward. You know, if refereeing the ball game is your thing that makes you accomplished for that week, then that's okay. You know, or reading a book or whatever it is, but you have to start somewhere in that bridge of I'm capable, right? And worthy of achievement. While at the same time knowing that like achievement for me means what's right for me, right? And not fitting into just a certain path that maybe has been laid out for me.
Right.
And being more creative, and that's where regulation's important, right? Mm-hmm. So safety and regulation, creativity, really creating different opportunities for different kinds of thinkers.
Yeah, and I know we're coming to the end of our time here, but I want to make a little bit of room for that. You mentioned different types of thinkers. I know you talk a lot about, and you do a lot of work in the with neurodivergency. Mm-hmm. Can you just say a little bit about what place that has in like your world and your work?
I definitely think that so many people feel like a failure because they're trying to operate in a way that their brain does not operate.
Okay.
People who have ADHD or undiagnosed autism, they find themselves at the cusp of failure every time that they attempt what would be considered a normal life goal, mm-hmm. right? And so I think we really need to get away from this idea that there's one way to succeed in life, right. Which is that, you go to college, you get a job, you get a better job, right? That doesn't work for everyone. People have different kinds of minds. Some people seek novelty, right? Mm-hmm. And excitement. And particularly sometimes we'll find some of those folks in recovery realms.
Sure.
And so why can't they have that?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't they do something that allows them to receive that in a way that's healthy? Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of room for just accepting who you are and, your God-given abilities mm-hmm. and limitations, right. and taking that with you on the path that you're creating.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking, why can't I be more like this person?
Right.
Or that person? Or
right.
the only way to succeed is this.
Yeah. And more like, well, how can I appreciate this person for who they are and how they found their place and learn from that to do it in my way.
Right. And that means sometimes showing parts of ourselves mm-hmm. to people that maybe we don't regularly, right? Because otherwise they're thinking, man, Josh, he has it all together, right? Like right. his clothes are, matching and mine aren't or whatever. Right. So if you have a struggle, sometimes I think it is important to disclose that to mm-hmm. someone, yeah. That you've created systems likely, I think we all have, in our lives to help us accommodate for things that maybe don't come as easy to us.
Yeah.
And I think people need to see that versus, myself growing up, I remember thinking why don't things just work for me in the way it works for maybe someone I would compare myself to, right? Especially mm-hmm. other women. And it's well, it just doesn't, right? And so when you accept that, then you have a lot of room to figure out what actually does work for your life.
Mm, yeah, that's good. I love it. Well, before we end, I really enjoyed this conversation. I don't think at any point, maybe you did, but tell us what your business is.
Okay.
And if anybody
for sure.
really enjoyed this conversation, they're like, hey, I'd love to work with Kristen. Where can I find her?
Yeah, so it's Hearth and Healing,
okay.
Mental health therapy. I have a small solo practitioner therapy practice
mm-hmm.
Down on 6th Street. Share an office with a massage practice and an acupuncturist. And it's very laid back. It's not clinical. It's not like going to a hospital environment or anything like that. And it's just one-on-one therapy sessions. It's no medication involved. No. Really, we decide together what the goals are. Yeah. Obviously there's some formalities, but beyond that, it's kind of a unique experience for each client. And I am very excited that it's accessible to us. I'm not saying that, I'm the only therapist that you can go to, but I just feel excited that I think people are thinking more, including you, about why can't we do that right here, mm-hmm. right? Why do we have to travel 2 hours to see a therapist? Right. Some people don't feel comfortable online, with their therapist. So, my goal is accessible, affordable treatment that's here, and that you don't have to travel for it, mm-hmm. and also that folks can feel like they can call and ask a question too, right? I get calls sometimes, just people wanting to know more about a certain situation or guidance, and I actually have 15 minutes to answer that, and I feel good about
That's
that,
nice,
right?
yes.
Like I was like telling my landlord, like, if that part of my model is ever lost, like, will you remind me of it?
Yeah.
Because I've just so much enjoyed, like,
Mm.
every 15-minute consultation or like community partner that's called me or that I've spoken to. Like, I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, beautiful. So people can find you online, or they can come down to the office, they can call you. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
I feel like maybe we might have to have a follow-up conversation at some point in the future.
Right. Thank
All right.
you.
Okay, so there's a lot that I could say about this conversation, but I'm going to hone in on one thing. I walked away from my talk with Kristen thinking, what stories am I telling myself? And how are they serving me? We do a lot of work here at Recover Appalachia with individuals in helping them explore and identify and hopefully begin to change self-limiting beliefs. Things that they take for granted, that they assume to be true. I tell people at the beginning of a training, look, this is one of our hoped for outcomes for you, that you're going to be able to put your finger on a self-limiting belief that you currently hold, that you're not even aware of at this moment, but it's keeping you from growing, from achieving your goals, from building the life that you want to build for yourself. And then begin to identify some strategies to alter that belief, to actually transform your mindset around this thing. The conversation with Kristen really helped me to see how the self-limiting beliefs that we hold are embedded within bigger stories that we tell ourselves. And we all do this every day. It's the way our brains work. It's like this storytelling mechanism that we have where we're taking our experience in life and it's immediately getting filtered through processes in our mind where we're packaging it in a way that we can understand it. A framework, a narrative that helps us to interpret our experiences in life, and this often takes the form of a story. We're telling ourselves stories all the time about our experience, and the problem is that sometimes the stories we tell do not serve us well. So it was a real challenge to me in talking with Kristen to reevaluate what stories am I telling myself right now that are holding me back. And how can I begin to self-author those stories? And that's really at the heart of our work with Recover Appalachia, is helping people regain a sense of agency, a sense of ownership over their life, over their future. And a big part of that is identifying these self-limiting beliefs and the stories in which they are contained, and then building the courage from hopefully this place of safety that Kristen talked about that's necessary for self-disclosure and growth and healing. Begin to identify ways that a person can reauthor a new story for themselves, a story that's going to be more empowering for them as an individual, that's going to help them see new possibilities for themselves and their family and their future and their community. And then you connect them with whatever resources they need to create that future, to build it from ground zero, day one, starting right now, and whatever that looks like. And that's not always a grand thing. For some people, success can just look like, I want to be able to just get up and go to work and not fall apart. I'm just looking for stability. And that's day one. That's what success looks like. That's what the vision looks like. And that's fantastic. And that's beautiful. And let's build that. What do you need to do in your life to self-author a new story, to do away with and change those limiting beliefs, and then connect with the resources and the people and the skills that you need to do it, to do the thing, to do the work. That's what I took away, among other things, from my conversation with Kristen. And I thought that really stood out well in her journey from being a therapist in like the government job, wanting to move out of that, but struggling with doubt, reaching out to a friend, asking essentially, can I do this? Is this for me? Seeking that affirmation, that validation, that support. Looking at other people who had done similar things for themselves and asking, well, what's the difference? Kristen talked about that, of wondering, is there a genetic difference? Are some people just built different? Did you get this from your mom? She asked, I think, at one point. But ultimately realizing no. The only fundamental difference between her at a year and a half ago, and those other people who had done the thing of creating a new life for themselves, was that they'd done it. They just had that simple courage to act. And that first step, which leads to another step and another step. And that's what Kristen said it's been for her over the past year and a half, is just one foot in front of the other. And man, that is all that it is. It's not a solo journey. We all have to come to that decision point for ourselves, recognize that we have that power of choice, create the vision, and then move towards it. But then we have to reach out and take the hands of all the people and all the sources of knowledge and information and whatever it is that we need to succeed, because we can't do it on our own. And that stood out to me as well from Kristen's story. The value of the connections that she's made, the mentorship that she's benefited from. We all need mentors, whether we're talking about in the recovery journey or the world of entrepreneurship. We need those vital connections with people who have been where we're trying to go. They can affirm us, they can validate us, they can challenge us, they can call attention to our blind spots, they can do all sorts of things that will help us get from point A to point B a whole lot faster than if we were trying to go it alone. So that really stood out to me as well from Kristen's story. And then bringing it all home in the end, the way she packaged it up, saying safety first is the whole thing. When it comes to self-disclosure and the vulnerability that it takes to actually move out of comfort, to not mistake comfort for safety, but to move out of comfort perhaps into new environments that make us very uncomfortable, that call for new skill sets and that make us very uncomfortable and put us into situations that demand growth and that demand we reach outside of our comfort zone, to take the help of others and to move towards a goal, a compelling goal. It starts with that, having that safety, those safe connections with mentors, with peers, with family, with friends, with a community, with whoever it is that allows us that space to say, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's what I want out of life or what I need. And here's the help that I'm searching for to get there. So, man, it was a fun conversation. There's a lot more that I can say, but I guess I'll leave it at that and maybe challenge you to ask yourself the same question. What story are you telling yourself, and how is it serving you or not? All right? Until next time, I'll leave you with that. Thanks for listening to Reclaiming Agency. If today's conversation sparked questions or challenged how you think about recovery, entrepreneurship, or economic development, we invite you to keep exploring these topics with us. You can learn more about Recover Appalachia and our work at recoverappalachia.org, and you'll find additional resources and upcoming events linked in the show notes. Until next time, thanks for being part of the conversation.